The riots in Leeds and Hare Hills can be attributed to several interconnected factors reflecting deep-seated social and economic issues. Specifically, the family involved seems to have been a Roma family, and the stories coming out are that this involved a child being left on their own with a baby and the baby being dropped. And the scenes, I've thought and thought again whether or not I'm going to post the videos that I've been sent by Twitter. Maybe, yes, I shall, because they are heartrending. And this is about poverty, and this is about economic disparity, and also the dog whistling about Muslims and immigrants. The family were apparently legally in Britain. They identify as Christian, as do most Roma. They often identify as Catholic. So the talk about a subcontinent response is simply prejudicial and divisive and prejudiced. It's unthinking, and it doesn't deal with the issues themselves. The issues themselves are about care for the poorer people in our community. People in this area have an average income of about £18,000, significantly below the national average. High unemployment rates exacerbate the financial strain on residents, contributing to a sense of hopelessness and frustration, many people having to do more than one job, and therefore childcare suffers. The poor living conditions. The area suffers from inadequate housing, underfunded schools, leaving many residents, particularly the youth, feeling neglected and disenfranchised. And this is the beginning of a school holiday. So finding people to care for children, very difficult. There's a long history of police brutality and misconduct within the West Yorkshire Police, particularly targeting oppressed minorities. This has fostered a deep distrust and animosity towards law enforcement. The number of police who were involved in this effort staggers. Is simply astonishing. And the sight of all the police running away when stones and things were thrown at them. Of course, one condemns all that all that violence, but the sheer number of police involved for one family, it makes no sense. There used to be an idea about softly, softly. This isn't softly, softly. This is a sledgehammer to crush a moth, and the Roma family. It highlights issues of racial discrimination, misconceptions, prejudices against Roma communities, strained social cohesion. And this is an area of Leeds which has a history of riots, including significant disturbances in 2001 and earlier in Chapeltown. Repeated episodes indicate unresolved underlying tensions, systemic issues about the failure of our police force. And statements from political figures like Yvonne Cooper and Nigel Farage fail to address the root causes of the unrest, focusing instead on law and order without acknowledging the systemic issues fueling the anger. This disconnect alienates the community, and the riots are symptomatic of a broader dissatisfaction with the socio-economic system exacerbated by austerity measures and economic crises. Similar events have occurred in other parts of the UK, and Farage didn't talk, as far as I know, about the riots in Cardiff, but he did talk about the riots here in Leeds because he assumed that they had a Muslim bias. They didn't. He is manifesting a racist assumption, and it's wrong. And of course, he's kept very quiet since since being exposed as wrong. Now, of course, people like me, we can comment, we can pick up the wrong information from headlines and so on. We're simply voicing an opinion which has probably already been voiced. We're not the newsmakers. We're not the people who have been elected to represent the community. We are simply there to report what is being said, which is what I do. I also add my opinion wherever I can, and I have particular tropes that that no doubt you will recognise. I have a particular dislike for inflated bureaucracy. I have a dislike for authority figures who overreach. I think the problem with the Leeds situation, and just to be completely fair about this, is the level of the sheer amount of police who are out on the street, number one. Number two, the failure to deal with the larger community, which leads to, for example, the arrest of a woman who was simply calling out for order. I mean, she was doing so rather vocally, and she was arrested. And of course, Richard Tice and co have been only too quick to point this out, but he's right. He's right. Why was she arrested? It's as if the police, once they're out on the scene, they've got to come back with some arrest. It doesn't matter if it's inappropriate, and the amount of money that is spent trying to justify this clod-hopping and completely untargeted, unfocused expression of force. It's an expression of force. It's not an expression of policing. It's an expression of chaotic and ham-fisted, after the event, self-congratulatory reaction. It's trying desperately to look as if it's doing something. Let's arrest this woman. And the entire scene is mismanaged by the authorities, by the social services, by the police, and, of course, by the politicians. Farage should have kept quiet. Tice, actually, to his credit, limits himself to simply talking about this very strange arrest of a person who was criticising the police approach. The police have every reason to be criticised. Their response was inadequate. And yes, the riot was bad. But this is a poor area, and we should be dealing with poverty, the effects of poverty, the reasons for poverty, and helping people rather than leaving them to get into trouble like this. We should. What on earth is the community services supposed to be for, except to help? And I'm afraid this idea of dragging children out is. And I have a dislike for unfairness and for pressures that disenfranchise our communities of people. But I also think that we need to see the smaller communities within the context of the larger community of our country. And the larger community of our country is only too happy to sideline these smaller communities and say, oh, that's the community in Leeds, that's a community of this sort, that sort. No, these are our communities. This is our community. And we can't hive off one group and say that's not our responsibility. It is our responsibility. For whom the bell tolls, ask not. It tolls for thee. We are not disunited. We are not separate from the rest. When one part of our nation is hurt, we are hurt.